Hello, today I'm going to retell you the article Rich Man's Club Plans Bretton Woods Reform. The article was written by Larry Elliott and Alex Brummer, and I'll tell you about the authors. Larry Elliott is an English journalist and author who focuses on economic issues. He is the economics editor at The Guardian and has published seven books, six of which were written in partnership with Dan Atkinson. Alex Brummer is an English economics commentator, and he works as a journalist, as an editor, and as an author. He has been the city editor at the Daily Mail since May 2000. There he writes a daily column on economics and finance, and he also was the financial editor at The Guardian between 1990 and 1999. So let's begin. The proposed root and branch reform of the institutions that have presided over the global economy and political scenes since 1945 is the ace up the sleeve of the group of 7 industrial countries meeting in Halifax this week. The main multilateral institutions, the United Nations, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, are all half a century old, and the global powers have decided that it's time to make them more relevant. Sound bites are being rehearsed to eulogize what, according to the leaked draft communique, will be the summit's blueprint for the reformed institutions. Few bookmakers would make a price of the word historic or the phrase global institutions that can match the challenges of the 21st century, leaving the lips of the President Bill Clinton before the week is out. This week's summit will only be the beginning. Even if the G7 agrees to all the items on the ambitious leaked blueprint, which is not remotely possible, this will be only the beginning of a protracted period of change. The G7 is braced for vehement opposition to its proposals, especially those that say that part of the UN's structure is costly, inefficient and unnecessary, for while the G7 wields its financial clout into the IMF and the World Bank, the UN has tended to be where the smaller, poorer countries have their say. And one of the British sources put it, Halifax will set out the way in which the G7 would like things to move, but it has to be followed up properly and sensitively, and the results can't be judged by what changes there will be in a week's period, but by what changes there are in a few years. The non-G7 members also cannot ignore the outcome of the Halifax meeting, because the G7 foots the bill for the world body's peacekeeping functions, its missions and high-profile meetings, and already teetering on the brink of a financial collapse, the UN would go under if the G7 refused to pay up. It is of course money rather than its anniversary or the impending millennium that is behind the G7's calls for change. The UN's funding conference in 1945 may have taken place at the moment of German capitulation, but this is of less relevance than Mr. Clinton's need to appease Jess Helms, Newt Gingrich and the rest of the Republican majority, clamoring for Washington to spend less on international institutions. Aided and abetted by the UK, the US would like to see the UN streamlined to avoid duplications with other international institutions and to introduce modern management techniques to cut waste. It also questions whether the UN Conference on Trade and Development is needed now the World Trade Organization is in operation, and whether the global capital flows and the foreign direct investments have made the UN Industrial Development Organization redundant. Privately, the US would also like to see the World Bank assume some responsibility for the humanitarian aid instead of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and partly to realize its original mandate for both reconstruction and development. Cynics might say that assault on the UN's alleged profligacy is a convenient smokescreen for the quiet revamping of the IMF, necessitated by the embarrassing collapse of the Mexican peso earlier this year. And the leaked draft communique says the developments in Mexico earlier this year have sharpened our focus. The G7 calls for the improved early warning system and the IMF Rapid Response Unit to assist currencies in difficulty, supported by the enhanced borrowing powers. And the G7 is largely united behind these changes, with only the question of increasing the IMF borrowing power causing dissent. A more likely approach to increase the IMF power is to increase the general agreement to borrow, a $10.9 billion facility run by the 10 largest industrial economies and Saudi Arabia. The proposal is not just to make the general agreement to borrow larger, but to increase the number of contributing countries, and this would help to recognize the increasing contribution of the developing countries to the world economy.